Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Anderson, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations. Before we begin today's session, please note that there will be time for questions towards the end of the presentation. So if you have anything to ask Mary, please just click the Ask a Question button. This session will be recorded and posted on our Alum Learning Consortium's past event recordings page in approximately 5 business days. Now, please welcome our moderator for today's session, Kathy Hansen, Vice President of Institutional Advancement, along with Vice President of Student Development, Mary Geller.
Thanks, Amy, and thank you and welcome to all of you who are joining us for the program this evening. It's a second in our series, as you know, in our St. Ben's at Home series, and tonight we're featuring a conversation with our Vice President of Student Development, Mary Geller. So thank you, Mary, for joining us. You know, this whole series was inspired by the fact that we're all spending more time at home. We're social distancing. We're not always seeing the people that we love most, you know, face to face. And we thought, what better time to bring St. Ben's to you? So we thought this would be a great time for you to hear about what's happening on campus, learn a little bit about what's in the future plans for us, and to hear some stories about students and faculty. Most of all, I think it's a time to be reminded that the Bennie network is alive and well and thriving. So I hope tonight will be a chance for you to be educated, for you to be entertained and inspired going forward. And with that, I'm going to start asking a few questions of our guest, Mary Geller. And after a while, we'll turn it back to you, the audience, who may have questions for her as well. So Mary, first of all, I have to thank you for being a really great sport about all of this and kind of, you know, stepping up to the plate for being a very early interviewee for this program. So thank you for that. And in the spirit of really stepping up to the plate, I have to ask you, what's your walk-up song?
I really have to say that publicly? Actually, my staff would probably know this because they've probably heard it coming out of my office every now and then. But I'm an 80s girl, and so I would say that my walk-up song has to be Madonna's Holiday.
Great. And I would ask you to sing a few bars, but that would really be unfair to you at this point.
No, but it's a classic, and the message holds. And if you listen to the song today, it's still true.
Great. Well, thanks, Mary. And the first question I really have to ask is, I think what's on everybody's mind, and that is, how are the students doing?
That's a great question. Kathy, I think that they're actually doing pretty well given everything that's happened. I've had the opportunity to be in conversation with many students from first years to seniors. I think that the students have been gracious and understanding. I think they've been sympathetic. I would be remiss to say that they're sad, but they're resilient and they've stayed focused through the semester. They've gotten their work done. They're worried, but they're hopeful. Yesterday I was telling a staff member, I said, hard and hopeful is kind of the paradox that we're living in nowadays. And I think the students are very much experiencing that while it is hard, they want to remain hopeful. I think they're happy to be done with classes. I think finals week done, that's good.
No doubt. Well, I want to kind of circle back to your comment that Bennies are resilient. I mean, I think we know that, we've seen that, that's been true over time. And I wonder if there's any kind of special stories or things that have really surprised you as you've watched how Bennies have really responded creatively or with resilience to this new reality.
Well, they're the digital generation, so they hopped online immediately. They've had really creative use of social media. If anybody's had a chance to watch some of the really fun athletic videos, the tennis team, the hockey team, the softball team, our softball coach, Rachel Click, she's just a wonderful, wonderful coach, did a parody on softball moms, which is hilarious. The one I loved was the swim and dive team dumping water on each other. So that's been really creative. The Senate did a really cute video on why they like to be senators. There's one group that I work with and advise, Kathy, they're called the Hines Scholars, named after Sister Nancy Hines. and they study what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a leader. And the group always puts together a large and complicated research project for Scholarship and Creativity Day. And so in terms of how they did that, they did it all online. They put it all together and they actually presented it online. So that was pretty amazing.
What was the theme of their research project?
It was on the busy Bennie syndrome, because one of the things that I've noticed about students, and I've encouraged them, is it just seems like students today feel like they need to be doing everything, that they're rewarded for being involved in so many things. And so our theme was, instead of being 10 miles wide and 2 inches deep, can we be 10 miles deep and 2 inches wide? And so they studied the busy Bennie syndrome and what it means to be over-involved and what that does to stress.
And how interesting, given these times now where the rhythm of life has changed. It hasn't always slowed down for everybody, but it certainly has narrowed the field of activities that most of us are involved in. So, I mean, kind of particularly relevant, I'd say. You mentioned Scholarship and Creativity Day. There's all manner of events that happen toward the end of the academic year, such as that. It does bring to mind the fact that 10 days ago, we would have been celebrating the commencement for the class of 2020, and 429 amazing young women would be walking across the stage and receiving their diplomas. And obviously that didn't happen, like I'm sure they and we would have wished. So I'm wondering how is the school celebrating this class, the class of 2020, given that we can't do all of the things in person that we would normally do?
Well, we will certainly never forget this class. I think they will always be special whenever they return to campus. I think we're doing the best we can. There's some pragmatic things that we're doing. We've mailed the class their caps and gowns. Dr. Hinton did a commencement recorded message for the graduates. We did a social media blast for the graduates where they could post pictures with their frame, college frame and things like that. Some of the academic departments have done some creative videos. The global business major, the gender women studies, there was a really cute video done by the communications faculty. International Intercultural IISS office did some virtual celebrations for students. Intercultural lead had a virtual celebration. And then later this summer, we'll be mailing out their senior t-shirts, which of course they would have received during senior farewell. And they'll get their diplomas in their commencement program.
Well, and I have to add that they're also going to be included in that mailing is going to be a welcome to the Bennie Alumni Network gift from our Alumni Relations Office. So they'll have that commemoration as well. Good. So
I do have to mention on Friday, I had the pleasure of participating in a Bahamian virtual commencement celebration.
Oh,
and it was put together by Derica Ferguson, and she did a fabulous job. And Raven Dames, who will be I believe she'll be a senior this year, she sang the song Rise Up by Andrade. And first of all, Raven, if you know Raven, she has an amazing voice. So she sang this song a cappella. And, I sent her a message the other day and I just said, thank you so much. It's my heart needed it because, I missed commencement, and I just told her it was so lovely to be able to celebrate and to hear her sing that song. And her response, she had a one-line response, and she said, I can't wait to see everyone again in the fall as we rise up together.
Oh,
and I
that's
thought,
perfect.
You just nailed it, Raven. And Kathy, I don't know how you feel about commencement, but in higher education for us, it's everything. It's our payday, right? Like we get to see the combination of all of our work come together as those beautiful women cross the stage. And, in student development, we know their stories, right? We know those who have really struggled financially, or maybe they've had an eating disorder they've had to overcome, or maybe they've had debilitating anxiety or depression or serious health issues, or maybe they lost a parent while they were in college. And you see her with such pride and her head up, and she walks across that stage and she becomes part of the Bennie Network. And just the sheer joy and pride that we have in all those students, it's amazing. And to not have experienced it this spring was hard. So I know that we're all holding our class of 2020 in our heart.
Absolutely. And, to know the obstacles that so many of our women just address so graciously and effectively, and, kind of move beyond them to become so successful is super inspiring. And then, I'm a sucker for academic regalia too. So the processions and all of that, it is amazing. So
and when you hear the first bars of the trumpet,
and
it's just like, yes, here we go, and it's just it's a lovely ceremony. And I hope someday we will be able to do it for this class.
Well, this is obviously a very important tradition, not only at St. Ben's, but throughout higher education. But there's also quite a number of other really significant traditions at St. Ben's. And I happen to know that you had a really important role in helping establish and sustain those traditions. So I think it'd be interesting for you to talk a little bit about maybe some of those traditions, whether it's candle lighting, whether it's the lighting of the Christmas tree, there's so many others, to talk about how we kind of maintain those traditions, again, even when we can't gather in person, and what those traditions mean to you.
I just remember some of the sisters would wax nostalgic about the pageant. And the story of the pageant, and how they would have to, the first year class would study and practice for days and rehearse to act out the pageant, and how the Huns would come and try and steal the light of learning, and all of that, and our motto is Sic Lucia Lux Vestra. And when I went to a conference once, and they talked about the value of traditions on college campuses. And at the time, St. Ben's has a very deep mission and tradition, but we didn't have a lot of student celebrations that reinforced the motto of the institution. And so it is Sic Lucia Lux Vestra, so let your light shine, from Matthew. And so I was trying to think of a way that we could maybe modernize the pageant. And so I came up with a candle lighting ceremony, which now I'm sure many alums recall, sitting in the HCC in the dark, with simple gifts playing in the background, and a really special, I think, and meaningful, where the sisters literally, they pass the flame of light that comes from learning onto the incoming class. And then, of course, alum relations picked it up and did it as a closer at the senior dinner. Yep. So we have that bookend experience of taking that light now out into the world, which is what Bennies do all over. So, candle lighting.
It's a really interesting kind of way to see how that image of the light has actually, flowed through that campus in a number of ways. So I think of our most recent, our Illuminating Lives campaign, and, the fact that image of the light of learning, but I also think of it as kind of the light of the spirit of our Bennies as well, being expressed through that fundraising campaign. So you have really, I think, established a tradition that has permeated campus and really made it, much more, present, I think, in all of our lives. I want to move now to actually a question about athletics, because I know a lot of the people listening tonight were athletes at St. Ben's, and I know, and you are a big, champion for women's athletics, and you see the difference that it makes in women's leadership development, just the development of the whole person. So, we're all wondering, so what might athletics look like this fall? And I wonder if you have any kind of crystal ball that can tell us what that might look like.
If only, Kathy.
Yeah, I know, I wish. If you find one, let me know.
Yeah, that's a timely question, because I just had a conference meeting, a MIAC conference meeting today for ADR's Athletic Direct Report. And we were talking about what we think the future is going to look like. And, right now, the analogy that I've been using is I feel like I'm trying to put together a 1,000-piece puzzle with no picture, right. And I don't know what it's going to look like. And right now, I think it's too early to determine, but I can tell you this, there was not one person on the call who wasn't determined as best we can to make sure that we have some kind of a season this fall. it might not look the same, but we do want to have a season if at all possible. And we'll work very hard toward that end. That's kind of
what we have to make sure that everything that we do this fall obviously is in compliance with the state and federal kind of safety guidelines. And that's, our first concern is the safety of everyone, but it's good to know that you and others are doing within those constraints to try to make sure that we've got athletics for our women this fall.
Yeah. And, you asked kind of how they're doing, and, athletes are so resilient, of course, by training. But I've the day that we had to leave campus, that was a heartbreaking day, because I knew that spring sports weren't going to be able to finish. And my heart especially went out to the senior athletes. But the coaches were so good about working through it with them. And even now, the softball team, they're doing their virtual team builders. Robin Balder-Lanou, who is another fantastic coach and has coached many years at St. Ben's, and I know there's many alums who know Robin.
Yep.
Robin did a virtual meet where they were given their event, then they did their event on their own, and then they posted their results. And so Robin was able to run a meet that way, which was pretty neat. And then of course we're running our we weren't able to do our athletic banquet either this year, and to be able to recognize our outstanding student athletes. And so we did a social media campaign where we're honoring our student athletes and award winners. And Gina Shields Armada just did gave an inspiring speech. She used to play softball for 4 years at St. Ben's. She gave a really inspiring speech to our student athletes.
I've seen a lot of the social media posts on Facebook and Instagram, I think. There may be other social media platforms as well. So that's been really, really inspiring. And I know I've heard you say the percentage of students that are involved in athletics at some level, not necessarily just varsity, but also club sports and other sports. It's very high percentages.
70% of our students are involved in either varsity or club sport or intramural sport. So we have a very active student body, no doubt.
And we know there's research too about not only graduates of women's colleges, but women who have participated in sports and how that feeds into their later success. So,
well, research has shown that the majority of women who are in the C-suite have been student athletes.
That's right.
And so student athletes really, being an athlete, it gives you tremendous amount of, discipline. You got to be organized, and you got to be willing to work hard, and you learn how to win and how to lose. You learn teamwork, of course, and collaboration. You learn how to listen to your
builds
leaders.
Confidence. There's so much to do with it. So good. I'm glad to hear that we're hard at work as much as we can to make it possible for our women to compete this fall. Want to ask another question that I think many people who are listening tonight might be interested in. I think there's a lot of folks who are listening tonight who may have made generous gifts to the Student Emergency Fund that we created immediately after the pandemic really started to hit, and we realized that we would be moving all of our education online for this semester. So back in March, and our alumni and friends really responded with tremendous generosity. So I thought it would be interesting to hear from you, kind of how did that get started? And how are we using that money right now? How is it making a difference for students?
It got started because everything was happening so quickly that week that we left campus. But I think within 2 days of, we told the students we needed to go. The Senate realized, well, first of all, they had some surplus of funding because they're responsible financial planners, and they budgeted conservatively, so they were estimating kind of a surplus for the year, right? So, way to go. But then they realized that they would have even more if they weren't going to be on campus to spend the rest of the money, and so they immediately called a meeting and they voted to donate the rest of the Student Senate fees to an emergency fund for students who may need help getting home, because these students had to leave immediately, and they hadn't planned on it financially. So it started with their Student Senate voting to turn over their student activity fees to help students who might need assistance in this COVID-19 world.
And that was a generous gift. It was, I think, a $20,000 commitment, as I recall.
Yes, it was.
Yep.
Yes, it was.
And then we sort of picked that up and said, okay, alums and friends, help these students out. So it really, it took on a life of its own, I think. And we ended up raising over $65,000, perhaps close to $70,000 to help students out. So you mentioned using some of the funds to like buy plane tickets or I suppose rental cars or whatever kind of bus tickets or train tickets home. Are there other ways we use that funding as well?
Yeah, we were able to get about 45 to 50 students flight assistance. We were able to, we got gas, hotel money for students who were driving home. We had a couple students like going to Oklahoma, Texas. We had several students over 30 students that we did food assistance for because they were food insecure and needed some money to tide them over. We are still helping students. There's a student that she's in one of my groups that I advise, and we were having a meeting one night, and she's back home down in Texas, and I noticed that I said, are you at work? And she said, yeah. She said, my mom and dad lost their jobs, so I'm working full time so I can support the family. And she had one earbud in, one earbud out. So she was working with her colleague at work, but she was listening to the meeting that we were in, trying to finish her research project. And, I just said, hon, if you need some help, just let us know, because we've had these really generous donors and we have this fund and this is what it's for. And, we want to be careful when you make that kind of offer, but she was so appreciative, and it made the difference between her being able to keep her internet and her cell phone and being able to finish the semester, really? and her not being able to do that. And so this fund was really significant. We were able to help students make it through the semester.
It warms my heart to know that friends and alums were able to help out in that way. And I mean, a lot of people may not realize that, some of our Bennies who are doing work study jobs, their money may be being sent back home to their families to help support
Absolutely.
the family. And so when they lost their work study jobs, that not only affects them personally, it has an impact on their family of origin. And that's significant. So to have resources to help address that is very important. And I know,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think it speaks to, what I love about St. Ben's is we talk about the development of the whole person, and they're not just a student, they're a whole person. So, because we had these donors and because we had this fund, I was able to see this student as a whole person, to say, you're not just a student, you're also trying to support your family. You have an obligation to, a responsibility to your family. You're taking it seriously. I told her, I said, you need to put that on your resume, because there's not a lot of 19-year-olds who carry that kind of responsibility, and you should take credit for that because you're amazing.
Yeah, they are amazing. I'm glad you could share that with the audience tonight. Students will be coming back in some way, shape, or form. We don't know exactly when, we don't know exactly how, but when you think about a college campus, it's like a town, right? There's places where people live and where they eat and where they shop, and as well as go to school. So what's happening right now to make the campus at least safely possible for students to return to?
Well, I think the first major decision that we made is that we were going to really close the campus for the summer and focus on opening it up in the fall. And so right now, actually this week, we have students coming back and getting the rest of the things out of their rooms. And then we will be doing a deep clean and a sanitization of all spaces. If we had had summer conferences and things, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So our focus definitely is going to be on the fall. We've also put together, Kathy, a resumption planning team, and we're meeting daily for several hours. And we're looking at scenario planning of what we would do in any given situation, so that we can be fleet of foot when we have more information and can determine which direction we need to head. We are really hoping that and planning that we will be back on campus in some way in the fall. That is our goal. and we're working toward that end. We're participating regularly, weekly, in meetings with the Minnesota Department of Health. We're being advised by the Center for Disease Control. We're watching for all guidelines, processes, policies, and procedures. And this has been a huge institutional effort. I can't thank my colleagues on the resumption planning team enough, and my cabinet colleagues, you among them, Kathy. I'm so blessed to work with such an incredible team during such a difficult time. It makes it bearable.
It's a great team. And I have to give a shameless plug for our next week's episode of St. Ben's at Home, where we'll have Provost Richard Ice joining us. And there may be more information he can share even in a week from now that might give us a little more, at least a little bit of an inside look at what might be happening this fall. But yeah, it changes, the data changes every day, certainly every week, almost every day. And the guidance changes that often as well. So I want to shift now and ask a few questions that are more about you personally, Mary. So I happen to know that this year represents the 25th anniversary of you joining St. Ben's as the VP for Student Development. So everyone, let's give virtual applause to Mary and wish her a happy anniversary. And I guess as I think back on that over 25 years, that was in the 90s that you came, and things have changed since then, right? In all sorts of ways. So as you think about student development, what has changed over these 25 years, but also what's stayed the same?
Well, my gray hair has changed. And I'm loving it just in time for COVID-19.
It's great, yeah, very timely move.
Well, definitely the Mary Commons wall hasn't changed, and Sister Lois hasn't changed.
That's right.
Still our #1 Blazer fan. The mission, of course, is timeless. The Catholic Benedictine liberal arts residential women. We're definitely, our student body is much more diverse now. We have a lot more first generation students than we used to. It's more national, and we draw more nationally now than we used to. When I first came, many of the employees were graduates of St. Ben's. And so even our staffing has changed significantly. There were more sisters, of course, on staff when I first came than there are now. But the Catholic nature of the institution hasn't changed. Although we are asking, how do we make kind of gospel living relevant for college students today? I think that's a question we're grappling with. We still need liberally educated students now more than ever, right? So students who are taught to look at the world's problems through multiple lenses, the search for truth, right? I mean, that Catholic call in the search for truth in an alternative facts world, that hasn't changed, and that's more relevant now than ever. And so, I always go back to mission, and I'm always driven by mission. So I would say some of those things haven't changed. I still think there's tremendous relevancy for education for women. A lot of people will, get into, a lot of people think, why does it matter? And it matters greatly. It matters greatly. So
our students tell us that, our alumni tell us that all the time. I mean, what a profound experience being at a college for women was, in this context. I want to follow up on something you just mentioned, the importance of the Catholic and Benedictine identity of the school. And I know that that's really important to you personally. And so I wondered if you might reflect a little bit on how the sisters, I guess, have formed your, leadership development, your professional development. How have they affected you?
Well, I don't think there's a Bennie who couldn't name a sister who hasn't impacted them greatly, if not a handful of them. So I am not unique in this at all. But I would say that the sisters raised me as a human being. Of course, my family did, but they taught me how to live in the world. They taught me the deep meaning of living in community. They taught me what love looks like across time. They taught me about how to change in place. You don't just get bored with something and leave. You change in place. They've definitely taught me about gospel living. They give me meaning and purpose to my work. As I think about the sisters now, I had a lovely phone call with Sister Lois today, and she just cracks me up. But she also, she touches me because she always is like, talks about how much she prays for me and things. Well,
Aww.
I know, like, wow. I mean, who gets to say that? Like, I know that there's all these sisters praying for me every day, so I better do a good job. But, I think, I could name Sister Mary Catherine, who's on our board. She was in campus ministry when I first came. Sister Sharon, love her, who's in there now. Sister Stephanie, who she's kind of, I've hired her as an advisor to my division. And she's so wise and so loving and so energetic. And my staff just love her. The students love her. She has a great line, Kathy. When she comes into our office, she puts her hand in the candy dish. Now you have to remember Sister Stephanie's about this big.
It's exactly.
She's a twig. And she always takes 3 pieces of candy because she always says, well, I need to take 3 for the Trinity, Mary. I think of Sister Susan. Sister Susan actually was in the residence halls as a resident director when I first came to St. Ben.
Oh, really?
So we go like way, way back. But, we had to make a really difficult joint decision at the beginning of this whole COVID-19 thing. And, her leadership is stellar. Her judgment is so steady. And working with her is just so peaceful. And, when you're advised by women like this, how can you go wrong? Another woman who I get to meet a lot of sisters, of course, because working in the college, but there's one sister in particular who I got to know over the last couple of years. And I just have to tell you about her because she's wonderful. So the Spirituality Center that the monastery sponsors does a lot of really incredible retreats. And every Lent they do this retreat, and Lent is really important to me. I think it's really important to find time to reflect in Lent, but it's almost impossible sometimes when you're working in a college campus. So I took this retreat. It was called Lenten Pause, I think, or something like that. And it was just once a week, and you would go and you would do a half an hour of Lectio Divina, and then you would have a simple lunch of soup and bread and just be in fellowship with the group. And then you would also get a half an hour spiritual direction. And so I was assigned Sister Josue. And I had never, of course I knew of Sister Josue, but I didn't really know her. And so, for 2 years when I did this, I was able to meet with her and get to know her better. And we were able to talk. It wasn't like the neophyte sitting at the knee of the crone, just taking it all in. It was a dialogue between 2 women trying to figure out how to live the gospel values in the world today. And, I think that's what the sisters do. They allow you a space and a place and an opportunity to just pause and bring your whole self and all your questions and just be. And I couldn't be grateful enough for that.
I think it's a wonderful testament to your leadership that you are open and vulnerable and shaped by that tradition, and that story that you can tell really matters. I think sometimes people might be surprised to learn too at the important role that the sisters play yet today with our students, and how the students crave that relationship with the sisters and the interaction. I know there's a number of programs where they're able to do that. Maybe you want to talk about a few of them.
Yes, Sister Lois runs the Benedictine Friends program and does a phenomenal job. Very, very dedicated to making sure partnering sisters with students. And I'm sure there's many alums who still, I know there's alums who still contact their Benedictine friend. These sisters meet with their Benedictine friends several times a month. There's always a monthly get together that Lois plans for all of them. That has been a wonderful program and a very, very important program.
And I understand that some of the sisters have 10, 12, 15 friends, right? They have more friends than that, but official Benedictine friends, right?
Yes, they do. They do. So, Yeah, another way they're invaluable to us. And even if you go into the local blend, who hasn't gone into the local blend
Right.
and found Sister Thomasette, and she's just ready to give you this great big hug and tell you how glad she is to see you and that she's praying for you. And you're like, darn, I just came to get a cup of coffee. I got some prayer too. Like, this is great. It's even running into sisters like that are just so genuinely happy to see you, and are really, they're hoping and praying for your well-being.
I think it says a lot about our students too. These are women who are looking to become their very best whole person, right? Spiritually, intellectually, physically, all of it, that they're seeking that out. And I think sometimes it's easy to think that, we always hear about the nuns, NONESs, when it comes to religion.
Yeah.
And in fact, what we see in so many of our young women is just the opposite, that they're really craving to be deeply connected with this religious tradition and spiritual tradition.
And the intellectual tradition.
And the intellectual tradition.
Brilliant, right? I mean, and not all these students who have Benedictine friends are Catholic. I mean, these sisters are role models for us in so many ways, how to live as intellectual giants in the world.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I want to make sure that we have time for the audience to ask some questions. So I'm gonna just pose a couple more and then we'll turn it over to the audience. So a question, or really a request. You've told lots of stories about what's going on campus, students, the sisters, all of that. I'd like you to kind of wrap this part of our conversation to a close, maybe telling a story about a student who's been especially inspiring to you during these crazy times.
I'll talk about this student because I just had a conversation with her yesterday and I told her how much she inspired me. And I'll actually name this student because I think she's okay with that. Her name is Alejandra Guayardo, Ali. And Ali grew up in the inner city LA school system. She grew up in an underserved Catholic school in particular. Her last 2 years of high school were very rough. She had a lot of family issues and not a lot of support, and was really, I think, ready, she said, to kind of give up when St. Ben's came to her school, when the college counselors came, and she thought, Minnesota from LA, right? But she was like, whatever. She's like, I have nothing else to lose. This is my opportunity for a new start. What the heck? Why not? And Ali had been a good student, and so she was able to come to St. Ben's. And she said, of course, it was a huge adjustment for her in many ways, right? And she supported herself economically, socially, emotionally, all the way through college. She didn't have much family support at all. And, Ali found her way. And I had the honor and the pleasure of being able to work with her last semester because she led our Heinz Scholars sophomore women's leadership group. And when I was talking to her, we were wrapping up our session yesterday and closing out. And I said, just talking to her about what did you learn and what did you like and those kinds of things. And she said, I wouldn't be where I was today if it weren't for St. Ben's. She said, I was running away from something, but I didn't realize I was running to myself. Oh. And now I have to tell you, Ali, she's found her passion. Teaching, environmental issues and urban policy are her passion. Ali's received an ACE fellow from Notre Dame, and she's going to be getting this summer. She starts classes for her Master's of Education in Teaching. And Ali is going to go out and she is going to change this world.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you, Mary, for sharing that. And before we turn it over to the audience, I'm going to ask the hardest question of all, and that is Bennie bars or chocolate lava cake?
Both, Kathy. Both.
I knew you were a both and gal.
I'm a both and. I'll make it work.
Okay, great. Well, Amy, do we have any questions that the audience wants to pose to Mary?
Yes, we do. And first, I also want to mention to the audience listening, the Ask a Question button is at the bottom of your screen. And if you're having difficulty finding it, sometimes you have to exit full screen in order to see the button. So the first question we have is, every class has its own personality. What do you think it will mean to be the class that graduated during the pandemic, or the class that started college during the pandemic?
The class that started, so the incoming class?
And the class that graduated. Both.
Yes,
the class
both.
that graduated? I think that the class that graduated has had to learn at a very young age tremendous disappointment. But I think if they can manage through this, we know life is full of disappointment. It just doesn't always go as planned. And so I think that this has built their resiliency muscle, hard as that is. So, and like I said, I think whenever they return, we'll always know it was the class of 2020, and they'll just probably get an extra big hug. So I would say that's, yeah, for the graduating class. For the incoming class, I think they're going to learn gratitude. I'm hoping they'll be, you know, I think we were becoming a society where if we didn't get exactly what we wanted, you know, there was kvetching. And I think now they're just going to be grateful to be together, to be back on campus. You know, I think things that we used to maybe kvetch about, we won't anymore because we understand what we have to lose.
Thank you, Mary. Amy, other questions?
Yes. One moment, my screen is refreshing here. You are a leader nationally in student development and stay at the forefront of the profession. As you look ahead over the next 10 years or so, what are the developments that you see becoming more prominent as we think about the student experience?
Oh my, well, if you'd asked me that 3 months ago, it would have been totally different.
Right.
You know, I don't think we will be forever changed and shaped by what we're going through right now. I do think that technology will play a much bigger role in education. I do believe that there will always be a place for residential colleges and campuses, and certainly the liberal arts, because we learn and live in community. And education is not a transaction. It is a process. And our previous provost whom I adore, Rita Canezo, she would always say at the beginning, just coming to college, it doesn't give you the right to a degree. It gives you the privilege to earn a degree. And so, yeah, I would say that.
I think we're learning things too in the process of it, making the adaptations we've had to make too, that some things we're learning aren't all bad. I mean, there are ways to kind of engage people with technology that we might not even have imagined would really work very well, in the past. And now we're seeing that it can play out. So I think it's opened us up to the possibility that building community can happen with a variety of tools and in a variety of media.
Yeah.
So I think that's important too.
And I think too, the groups that I'm in, we've been actually meeting through this. And we're all asking the same questions, like, what does this mean for the future? I'm on the board for the National Student Affairs for National Colleges and Universities, and we're all grappling with the same questions. But I also I don't think it's a bad thing. I think sometimes you can get complacent, and I think this has really shaken everything up, and it's going to force us to look at everything with fresh eyes.
It'll be interesting to think about the students coming this fall for the first time, are entering class, and they've had a very different, spring, right, and their high school experience. And I wonder how that will affect their transition to college, if it might make it easier and that they might be more adaptable, or if they'll have some, I don't know, reservations because of the experience they've gone through. But I have to imagine that this group of incoming students is going to bring a set of experiences that are going to affect how they make this transition. So we'll watch and see.
I agree. And I think we're going to have to be very attentive, and we're going to have to be fleet of foot to be able to meet their needs.
Right. Amy, other questions?
Yes, this one comes from Kelly Smith. She asks, how do you think students will be impacted or St. Ben's culture will change with having a joint president with SJU for the first time?
Well, I mean, I do think it will change significantly. I don't think it's a bad thing, though. I think we'll be more aligned in our policies, our processes, our procedures. We'll be able to probably make decisions more quickly. You know, I think we'll be able to be more intentional about the student experience, the blended student experience, than perhaps we are now. You know, I do think that St. Ben's in particular is being very attentive to making sure that the culture, the history, the traditions of a women's college remain at the forefront. And I have been able to participate in some of those conversations, and I'm extremely confident to the leadership of those who are taking this on. So I think, you know, like any major change, it's uncomfortable. It feels odd. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But I also believe that it's the right thing, and that I think we're going to be better and stronger because of it. And I don't think it's not a net loss. I think it's a net gain.
I know that it's, you know, fair to say that those of us who are in the cabinet, senior leadership at the college, and our board, the St. Ben's board, have been very vocal about saying, lifting up the importance of St. Ben's remaining a college for women, with a focus on, you know, the academic experience for women and women's leadership development. And I think one of the things, this conversation about moving to a single president, one of the things that's done is that it's forced us to kind of interrogate that. What does it mean to be a college for women, and to be vocal about its importance and what it means in a way that we might not have before. So I found that gratifying to kind of see people put their stake in the ground, I guess, in terms of, you know, what this matters, or how this matters, and what it means for identity going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I was trying to think. I just sent a letter this week to the new Senate, the new St. Ben's Senate, and I'd like to see the women's only St. Ben's Senate continue. Because when you're in a room, when women leaders are in a room full of women leaders, you're at the center. You're not at the margins. And I think that is huge, especially for young women who are learning to become leaders, where they're testing themselves and their voice. They're in a room where they're among their peers, and they don't have to worry about some of the societal expectations. They can just, you know, practice who they are.
And their voices are valued and taken seriously. I think that's an important experience.
Absolutely.
I think it's also worth mentioning too, that on our board of trustees this year, for the first time, we have an actual board committee that's focused on being a college for women. And I know you're an active member of that committee. And I don't know, you might talk a little bit about what's the purpose of that committee and what happens there.
Well, it's led by the President's Chief of Staff, Catherine Enck, who actually has some expertise in this. So I would defer to her in some of this, but I was able to participate in the last meeting where they were talking about kind of coming up with a statement about what it means to be a college for women, and I was able to participate significantly in that conversation. And you know, it's always mattered to St. Ben's. It's part of our history. We were founded at a time when women's education wasn't valued. And the thing that I liken it to now is we're about to celebrate 100 years of the women's vote this fall.
Yes.
And I think people forget how, you know, I mean, I think 100 years to a 20-year-old sounds forever ago. 100 years to somebody over 50, not so much.
Not so much.
But, you know, I think the point is people forget how hard we've worked for the progress that we've made, and we can't take it for granted. And, you know, that is part of our mission as a college for women. And that's what we want to see maintained.
Well, I think it also really lifts up how, in some ways, countercultural or even, you know, radical in the very best and truest sense of the word, it was to found a college that says women deserve higher education. And a lot of these were daughters of immigrants coming to central Minnesota. So, focused on the, first generation Americans and again, valuing the importance of higher education for women. That was really countercultural. It happened before we even had the vote. I think that's important.
It did, yeah.
Amy, any more questions?
Yes. This one comes from Valerie Jones. She says, Bennies love to show up. How can we show up to support current students right now?
Oh.
And if you could ask alumni to do one thing that would contribute to the success of current students, what would you ask us to do?
Well, I'll just say it, give. Scholarships make a huge difference. We were just talking about how St. Ben's was founded for women, and we've always I think welcomed those on the margins, and I think a lot of times those on the margins don't have the same economic resources that those in the middle do. So please, even if it's $5, whatever you can to do to give back would be great. I love when, I think, is it the Valentine packages that the alums do? That is just the students, you can hear the squealing in the residence halls when they get their packages. So participate in alum programs as much as you can, letter campaigns, gifts to the students, the call that we put out for the emergency funding and you all just responded and stepped up. Those are wonderful. And I think, just something as simple, if you can't give, then pray for us. We could always use your thoughts and prayers.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks, Mary. Amy, more questions?
Yes. Barbara Hopi asks, Mary mentioned that they recently talked about what the sports season might look like. Has there been discussion about the arts, particularly music ensembles and theater productions?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's all going to depend on social distancing. Yes, we have been talking about that as part of this. It's all going to depend on social distancing. One of the things we were kind of talking about, we were talking about how do we do the candle lighting ceremony differently this year. And I said, what if we put the orchestra out socially distanced on the mall and then kind of socially distanced our students with the candle around them. So we're going to try and be as creative as we can, but we're still waiting for guidance on that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Amy?
Yes. This question is from Stacy Tonneson, and she says, I'm wondering if CSB is considering the decision Notre Dame made to start school early and skip fall break. Then after Thanksgiving, the students will be off from Christmas break.
So we know a lot of schools are taking this under consideration, and we did consider that. It still could figure into one of our scenarios, but right now our preferred scenario we need every minute of the summer to prepare for it. So I don't know yet if we would start early. I think it's a good idea. I think it makes sense, but I think that there is a tremendous amount of work that has to happen. Even facilities have said that it's going to take them up until almost the last day of August to get the campus sanitized to the level that it needs to be. So lots of different balls up in the air. So we'll see.
I also think the governor, or at least the data that in Minnesota is guiding a lot of the governor's decision making, suggests that we may not even see the peak in Minnesota until July. And so different states peak at different times, and that can affect both when you want to start, but also when you might anticipate a second wave, because it looks like that will also be part of the picture too. So trying to anticipate those things also factors into timing. And again, with Provost Richard Ice being a part of this series next week, it'll be a chance to talk more about some of the academic calendar scenarios that we're looking at then. So I encourage you to come back and participate.
So Kathy, I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
And so the final question we have here is, what's something you're reading or listening to for fun or inspiration right now, Mary?
I get out and walk at lunch because I'm Zooming all day long. So just to relieve my eyes, I listen to podcasts, and I'm actually, I like to listen to Shankar Vedanta's, The Hidden Brain. He's the Hidden Brain podcast. There's some really good ones on there. I'm reading right now. I'm reading The Years That Matter by Paul Tough, and it's about the college years and why they matter. So it's a pretty easy read. It's interesting. I'm doing that kind of more for work related, but for fun. For those of you who have studied abroad in Ireland, my book club read a book this spring called Murder in an Irish Village. And it's a whole series. So it's like murder at an Irish wedding, murder at an Irish pub. And it has a lot of Gaelic kind of references and things in there. And one of them takes place, I think it takes place in Galway. Anyway, it's a fun, light series to read by Carleen O'Connor.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Mary. And I know you don't have a lot of time these days for reading for fun, but I'm glad you're getting something in. So I want to thank you today for joining us for this conversation. And I want to thank everybody in the audience for being a part of this evening's conversation. Mary and I will be logging off soon, but I encourage you to stay on, where you'll get some details about tonight's podcast and information about upcoming podcasts from Amy Anderson. So thank you for this evening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you again, Mary and Kathy, for your time this evening. Audience, you can share additional questions or comments on tonight's episode through the evaluation form that will be emailed to you by the Alumni Relations team. The next episode in our St. Ben's at Home series will be held next Wednesday, May 27th at 7 p.m., featuring Richard Ice, CSB SJU Provost. During this episode, we'll be looking at the academic program at CSB. We hope that you will join us, and please invite your Bennie friends as well. You can find additional details about the St. Ben's at Home series on our csbalumni.com/events page. Thank you all for attending.